Awesome. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday, October 12th. My name is Sherrell Dorsey. I am the founder and CEO of The Plug. We are a intelligent news and insights platform covering the Black innovation economy. And during this LinkedIn Live session, we're doing something a little different as we are in partnership today with ImpactAlpha. I want to kick things over to my co-host, David. David, please introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Sherrell. I'm David Bank. I'm the editor and CEO of ImpactAlpha. We cover everything impact investing. And I've got a lag on my LinkedIn here, so I'm going to power that down. Sorry about that. There's always got to be some tech issue, right, Sherrell? Thanks. What I want to say, Sherrell, is I'm so excited to be working with you. We've been tracking along together for a while. We both have these publications. We've been working on the business side, but this is the first time we've actually put something on together. So I'm so excited. I want to embarrass you a little bit by sending everybody over to the podcast interview that we did with you last week that dropped last Friday. We'll put the Spotify link in the chat, but everybody should have a listen. Sherrell was terrific, and I learned a lot about your background. So anyway, it's great to be together, Sherrell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Always a pleasure to work with you. It has definitely been a few years. And what's funny too in this virtual world is that, David, you and I have always had a virtual relationship. And so I don't think we've ever been in the same actual physical space together, but how apropos is it that we're able to host these conversations and do very impactful work virtually. I just want to take the time to really recognize folks who have joined into the session to listen in. It looks like we have Ayori from the Bay Area. Please forgive me if I do butcher your name. Unika, Mark Hubbard, Yangbo. Really, really grateful that you all have joined us thus far. As we start this conversation. And David, I want to go back into why this topic is so significant, and also just discuss a little bit about the panelists that we have today. So maybe, David, you can talk a little bit more about how we decided to come together to have this conversation about, Black tech green solutions.
Well, I mean, we've been, covering both the racial justice reckoning, as people call it, as well as the climate emergency. And it just becomes more and more clear that those things are very linked together, both the problem, but also the solution and the solutions, I should say. And I mean, I think we're going to hear from our guests about a whole bunch of the kind of advantages, or sort of the, investment thesis, as it were, theses. One of them is scale. I mean, we're talking about a retrofit of essentially the entire economy. I mean, it's, and I think we get Donnel Baird from BlocPower, he talks about, and he actually was just in the New York Times this weekend. He said, yes, there is something we can do about climate. We can retrofit every building in every community for energy efficiency and clean energy. Similarly, we can have electric vehicles, not just in upscale neighborhoods, but in every neighborhood, and we can have, clean energy and pollution-free energy in every community. So, scale, I think, is a big one, and then just also, what people talk about, proximity, community-led, ground up. I mean, I think there's a lot of advantages that come from people thinking this way, and our goal really is to have investors, open their aperture a little bit and think more broadly.
And the time is apropos, right? I mean, we are really living in a time where we are having to address climate and technology and renewable energy in a very acute sort of way. Just based out of necessity. And so when we also look at the landscape, we look at the recent infrastructure bills and opportunities that are happening when we're talking about more dollars than ever going into solutions towards climate mitigation and conservation and all of these opportunities. There's this sort of pinpointing of identifying how communities of color, those who are traditionally underserved, when we think about across the landscape, across the ecosystem, from investments to entrepreneurs and technologists creating in these spaces. There truly is a different kind of conversation being had around equity. I'm excited about today's panel because we're going to get some perspectives across the industry from a variety of Black leaders who are in this space. And I just wanted to shout out for a second here, again, as more people start to filter into the room. I see Solomon has joined us, Wima Lombe, again, Majora Carter, who's been behind several initiatives in the South Bronx around creating startups, but also, green climate and opportunities, really creating this social justice movement. Brian, West Point, thank you for joining in. Amma, thank you for joining in. It looks like just folks from all over the land, someone from Switzerland to Detroit, Amy Alexander, who's been just great in this has been talking so much about corporate social responsibility. There's so many intersections that we're going to be able to discuss today, David, that I'm really excited about. But I think more important really is the focus on the work that our publications do as well to ensure that the journalism, the research, the data that we're covering really helps to inform, everyone in this room and our audience, at the core around what they should be paying attention to in terms of trends and who's leading those trends. So I do encourage everyone who is not currently subscribed to The Plug or to ImpactAlpha to make sure that you sign up today. We're at tpinsights.com. I'll flash a banner here, at the bottom, and then also I'll flash one for ImpactAlpha. So make sure you're signed up for our briefings. These are detailed, free briefings that will really help you to get an understanding of who are in these spaces from an impact standpoint. And so it's really great, again, for us to be able to come together to have these conversations. But again, following this, we're going to have a special offer that you all can become, premium members to get greater access, greater data, and greater opportunities to really learn about, what is happening across the landscape. So this is, of course, one of many conversations that we're having across the journalistic space, the research space, as we're starting to look at these solution providers within the green tech, clean tech spaces.
Terrific. And Sherrell, people are introducing themselves, but I just want to encourage everybody to sort of give a shout out where they're from, what they're up to. We've been doing that on our Agents of Impact calls for a while, and folks seem to be able to connect with each other. And speaking of Agents of Impact, we have both. We think everybody in our audience is an agent of impact. We also feature profiles of Agents of Impact, and a bunch of the folks that are on the call today have been profiled and featured as Agents of Impact. So I want to welcome all the Agents of Impact.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Looks like Joe Brickman, as well as Cassidy Johnston. I just participated with them at the Fuel Conference, focused on social entrepreneurship and green solutions. So it's always great to see friends and colleagues in this space hopping onto these calls. I think we're all working our corners of the world to really highlight what's taking place and what are going to be the best practices that are going to drive the work forward. So without further ado, David, I would love for you to introduce maybe our first guest who's coming to the table.
Well, Taj Eldridge, I think a lot of folks know. I've seen some people in the comments already. Welcome you, Taj. I see your, there you are. I knew you at the LA Clean Tech Incubator. I think you're still attached there, but you've now got a new gig at Include Ventures, and you're both investing, obviously, but you're also bringing up a whole new crop of fund managers. So welcome, Taj.
David, Sherrell, thank you so much for this timely conversation that we're having, and I appreciate both ImpactAlpha and The Plug for having this talk with not only myself, but some phenomenal founders as well.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and really dive into some of these correlations of climate change and that intersection with inequity. Can you talk about how firms like yours are investing in solutions where these challenges really intersect?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sherrell. I think just to start off, this idea of sustainability, and if I may, I'll be very frank, and I always say when we have these panels and these things on LinkedIn, a lot of investors are really afraid to speak the truth because they're afraid of investors would say about that. Sometimes a lot of founders are afraid to speak the truth because they're afraid what investors are going to think. But somebody once told me that scared money don't make money. So for me, I'm about truth. And I think the truth has been, we've been in the economic Juneteenth around this space. When people start talking about sustainability, circular economy, all this stuff on climate change and clean tech, people of color and immigrants have already been there. Take for example, circular economy. How many people in the chat that came from communities of color, they had to wear their cousins' clothing when they were growing up? Circular economy. We just called it a different focus and a different name. And the thing about it that's really interesting is that the capital that's out there is still not coming to these communities via some of these founders. And I think there's a big opportunity for us as investors to make alpha and to increase alpha by really supporting a lot of these opportunities that are coming from the founders and the technologies that they're creating. And that's one of the reasons that my partners and I decided to launch Include Ventures, which is not only a fund to invest in wonderful founders like the three you're here today, but also develop and really cultivate the fund managers that are focusing on climate. As an example, we recently partnered with Hewlett to provide funding to diverse, underrepresented fund managers, not just in the US, but also in Europe. Because if we're really talking about this climate change, just fixing the air in Los Angeles is not going to do it. We're going to have to do it not only in the United States, in Europe, in China, in the continent, and many other places as well.
Taj, we talked about scale a little bit at the top here, and I know you've been thinking about that. I mean, just try to draw the connection between the climate tech opportunity and really, like we said, reaching every neighborhood, every community, and you just said every country.
Absolutely. I'm even though my graduate degree is in economics, my undergrad degree was in literature. So I'm very appreciative of being here with two journalists. And because of that, I understand as an investor and a former founder that storytelling is important. And if I may, I want to tell this brief story and to tie into that. When I was growing up, I lived in Dallas, Texas, and there was an area in Dallas, Texas that was highlighted by Soledad O'Brien on BET that talked about a waste dump. Growing up, I never paid any attention. And years later, 3 of my family members have passed from kidney failure. I myself have kidney failure as well, and I'm on dialysis. Why? It's because the lead poisoning that's in my city that no one told anybody about. And so when we talk about climate change, when we talk about clean tech, I want people to understand when we're investing, we're not investing to save the mammals and save the earth. We're investing to save Keisha, to save Taj, to save Derek, and everybody else, because climate change is a public health issue, it's a social justice issue, and it's an economic issue. And regardless of that, if you're an investor and you don't believe that you're an impact and that the investments you make don't have an impact in that space, you're only about money. So let's talk about it. And if we're about that space, there's something that just happened called the pandemic that didn't matter how much money you were making, shut down everything. So this idea of investing in climate change and investing in diverse communities, what it really is about is not only doing all that from a standpoint of public health, environmental justice, and also economic justice, but it's also achieving alpha, because there's opportunities as investors to make. And I'll tell you, David and Sherrell, I've been in venture and a founder for a very long time, at least the last 20 years. And these conversations that we've been having about the lack of capital for founders has been going on since I even started. So for me, my question is, well, what can we do to change? Because I don't want to keep talking about it. And one of the things you can do to change it is to have it scale more investors of color that are in the space, where if other people are not looking at that opportunity, I know somebody who will. And that's the whole idea that we're trying to do.
You've been talking about it for a long time. There is some feeling that there's a moment now, both on the racial justice side and on the climate side. What does it take to make that moment kind of stick? As they say, moment to movement, or what does it take? Yeah,
I think there's a book called Words That Work by a gentleman by the name of Frank Luntz, who's in the political space. And for me, what that means is that we have been talking about climate all wrong. And I think a lot of times for us, we're in the climate space, both as investors and founders, we're talking to ourselves. There's a certain song by this griot, and he says, in the middle of the summer, he has a hoodie on. And for me, what they told me was that the younger generation are realizing slowly the impacts of climate change. They're realizing that something is not right. They're realizing that when Hurricane Ida came to Louisiana and decimated that community, why was certain communities without power for weeks after? And so there's a primary effect of climate change, a secondary effect of climate change, and a tertiary effect of climate change. And I think what's happening, though, is that it's an opportunity for founders and investors to solve problems who are in this community. For me and Include Ventures and my partners, when we think about diversity, we think about more than just gender diversity and racial diversity, and they're important. But I think we think about geographic diversity, because we want to make sure that we're making these innovations, not just in California, San Francisco, in New York, and the coast, but in Missoula, Missouri, in Iowa, in Austin, and all these other places where you have different communities that are there and that need to have the same type of connection. I'll tell you, David and Sherrell, one of the things that made me extremely happy, God bless Elon, God bless the Cybertruck, I love it. I'm from Texas, like I mentioned, so I wasn't feeling it. But when the F-150 came out, if you're in the chat, let me know. That one was a monster. And I'll tell you, the whole idea is that once you start connecting and getting other communities around the benefits of that, but we're doing it in a way where they can understand it and that language is there. So not only we're talking about it from a standpoint of how we're talking about it verbally, but also how we're talking about it in the products that we're creating. That's how you're getting other communities to come into this space and really enjoy and really benefit from clean tech and the climate innovations. And not only that, for us as investors to receive alpha.
I love that, Taj. I think that cultural connection and competencies matter a great deal. And I knew that we were somewhere when Kameale and Saweetie were talking about their Teslas, and you started to see the Teslas with the Falcon doors up in the music videos. That was making a difference. And Saweetie blinged out her Tesla. And there's an entire group. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, because I feel like you are a very stylish gentleman. And so I imagine you are part of some of the know around, like, there's a Black Girls with Teslas group. And it's all fashion forward, but also very sustainable. And I think that the seeping into the culture also helps around this, like, behavioral change that's very much identified with modern design and the things that, we gravitate towards as consumers.
Yeah, and everything, for me, and I appreciate that. I have to give the style up to my wife because she's the master of all of that. However, I'll tell you this: everything is purposeful. For me, even the hat, the clothing, the shoes I've been wearing, they're been made by sustainable brands. Shoes are made by greats that bring ocean waste. Hats by NTTE that uses waste material to make hats. And so again, the whole idea I've been seeing is that it's seeping into everything that we do, from what we're driving to what we're eating. We saw Drake invest in an alternative protein company out of Santa Monica. And you're right, that the idea is coming. We talk about it, Include, that we always talk about how we provide more. And I think this is another thing really quickly, and I'll leave with this, that investors need to realize. I'm grateful that there's a lot of investment coming into the space, and there's different type of investors, but investors are going to need to have more than just a check. And I'm extremely proud, and I hope she mentions that here. There were some founders who just raised, and people can get into a round. Black woman company, and I was extremely proud. And one of the things I always talk about for us is that we try to provide the 4 C's when I make investments: access to capital, access to customers, access to connections, and lastly, access to culture. And culture is not just from a racial and gender standpoint. We're talking about culture of winning. And so that's the thing I think we're going to see. And I'm loving to have that in this climate conversation.
Absolutely. We are so appreciative. Thank you so much, Taj, for being here. It looks like David may have one more question.
No, I was just gonna say to Sherrell, Taj, maybe you could do us the favor and introduce Kameale, who's coming up next, because I know you've been working with her.
I would love to, and again, I'm like the uncle with the story. So I met Kameale at Nipsey Hussle's house, his incubator in South Central. God bless Nipsey. And she was in this pitch competition, and I'm so proud of her. For the investors to know, the point from when I met her, when she even thought of the company, to the time she raised was a year. So invest, plant seeds, and that's what we should do as founders. But I want to introduce Kameale Terry of ChargerHelp out of South Los Angeles. Kameale, please.
I love that you two met at Nipsey Hussle's house. That was a storyline that I had no idea about. Thank you, Taj, for that introduction. Kameale, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Taj.
Yeah, I first want to just thank Taj when we talk about who is like the godfather of like clean tech. And he's created so many pathways for us, just like Black founders in this space. So super grateful for him. And also Donnel, who will be here later. But yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Kameale, why don't you just maybe describe what ChargerHelp is doing and what the big idea is?
Sure. So I actually started working at a company called EV Connect almost 4 years ago. And actually started as driver support. So anytime an EV driver had any type of issue with the charging station, I was the lovely voice they got to speak with. Glad I got to hire for that position eventually. But then had the opportunity to stand up their call center and their customer experience department. And then I was director of programs. And so my team, we led a lot of the infrastructure build here in the US. And then also had the opportunity to do some consulting work out in Australia and Canada. And what we kept finding out was that while it was extremely easy to get these stations, well, say that tongue in cheek, kind of easy to get these stations in the ground, when they started having, non-electrical issues, so communication issues and firmware issues, and the best that we could say to them was to, hey, cycle your breakers. I knew that we had to think about how we were going to solve these issues a little bit differently. And why not utilize technology, right? And so at ChargerHelp, we fix electric vehicle charging stations, but we do it two cool ways. We utilize technology in order to aggregate data, in order to get faster and better about the infrastructure we're putting out there. And then we hire locally, not because it's a nice to have, but it's the best way to build a business in regarding to cost and also EV adoption.
David, were you gonna hop in there?
I always got more questions.
All right, well, I'm gonna hop in. Actually, over at the plug, and again, you all, as you are joining us, thank you. It looks like there's so much incredible conversation happening here in the chat. I also see your co-founder Yvette Ellis has joined as well. The plug is actually in the midst of dropping our case study on the ChargerHelp business. You all have seen some incredible funding opportunities, particularly related to the future of work. What I love about the ChargerHelp story, you are two ladies in the Compton area creating this scalable opportunity for those to get certifications, to get paid, was it upwards of $30 to $50 per hour to provide service to EV stations? Is that correct in terms of the dollar amount, Kameale?
We start off with a minimum of $30 an hour, and we're currently creating 2 additional tiers to allow for technicians to progress within the company.
That's incredible. And these are full-time roles. These aren't that kind of, turn on an app and have a job for the moment. This is long-term sustainable work for people and their families. And so we know, Kameale, that communities closest to the impact of climate change are often left out of the solutions, just based on our conversation with Tosh, who mentioned that as well. Now, how easy was it to mobilize communities to be part of the solution through EV training and maintenance? And some of these future work solutions that you all are bringing to the table, are people getting it? Are they signing up in droves to get that training from ChargerHelp?
Oh, absolutely. And a huge shout out to my co-founder who spent the last 10 plus years with the Department of Labor's Job Corps system of creating pipelines for work. And so, when we went out to recruit our first batch of technicians, we hired 20 people. We had 1,600 people apply, right? And it's really because of the way that Yvette and I have thought about workforce development. We say that today, companies leave, specifically tech companies, we leave talent on the table. We utilize arbitrary barriers in order to identify who is good at talent, right? So we utilize, college degrees or high school diplomas, but we know that there is a vast majority of people that can perform really great, job tasks that didn't go to college, right? That may not have the high school diploma. And so what Yvette did was she thought about the recruitment process. We removed those barriers. And then instead we said, okay, what allows for a person to be very successful at that job? And now how can I create a recruitment pipeline around identifying that type of success? And I think that it goes beyond just, for Black and Brown communities, we really see the way in which we've built our business. It's just to be a better way of doing business, and actually a more profitable way and a more sustainable way to do business.
Well, so let me ask you this then. You guys got in early. I know the infrastructure bill, and bills, if they ever get passed, have a lot of support for electric charging and charging networks. How are you positioned, or what do you need to be positioned to scale up with that massive ramp up?
Sure. I feel very privileged to toot my own horn, because one of the things that I think that as startup founders, we don't necessarily think about is policy, right? And so from my first hire was head of government relations, because I understood the ways in which laws can make or break your business. We built our company, when we started building our company, Trump was in office, right? And we still were able to do really well with the idea that Trump might have been rehired. So when we look at the infrastructure bill, it's just, icing on the cake for us. But then we made sure early on that we were a part of those conversations, that we were in the room. The first thing that Yvette did was to establish a Department of Labor ONET code. So now we're saying that the people that do this work are EVSE technicians, which has been recognized by the Department of Labor. And now when we go out to talk about RFPs and infrastructure bills, we say, oh, well, who needs to do this work? EVSE technicians. Currently, ChargerHelp is the only folks with EVSE technicians. So we really thought deeply about this and utilized, honestly, our backgrounds of having family members be excluded to be forward thinking. So to your point earlier, Sherrell, it's not only about giving folks opportunity, to get hired, is giving folks opportunity to start companies, because we come with a different viewpoint that's actually an additive and an addition, and it allows the industry to be better and smarter because of our vantage point.
I want to talk about some of the more recent investments you all have received. So New Profit, which is a venture philanthropy firm, really hyper focused, following the kind of beginning of the pandemic, as I should say, really kind of pushed out this initiative around funding companies that were rapidly reskilling individuals, particularly Americans, into these kind of new job opportunities. And I know that they were one of your investors, but when we look at the investors that are invested in companies like ChargerHelp, what does that actually look like? What companies are saying, like, we're coming to the table with ChargerHelp, we believe in this, we want to help you all scale? Who are your partners?
Sure. And just to correct you, so New Profit is not an investor in ChargerHelp. What we did do, though, was that we went out to pitch. So in the beginning time, before we took on or gave up any equity, we went out to pitch. And we actually did a lot of pitch competitions where we got grants. So we actually received a grant through New Profit, non-equity, which is very important for founders to know that is a route you can go about in regards to receiving funding. But in regards to our partnership, like, that's what we think about partnership. It doesn't have to be just an investor. It can also be people that are, rallying for you. And we figure out ways to ensure that it is a win-win opportunity. And so we've seen, Trucks VC was the folks who led our round, who traditionally is a Series A investor, but they saw the work that we was doing and how we were doing it. And that's why they wanted to be a part of the table. And also Jobs for the Future, and even Energy Impact Partners, which their LPs are utilities, which to me was a huge deal for our industry, because truth be told, utilities, write all of our checks at this point in regards to, putting out RFPs. So we see all of these main drivers within the industry that saw what we were doing as important. But I think that the testament to the industry is that, like, they were interested in how we were doing it, that we were supplying good jobs, and we were being thoughtful about recruitment. And we hear that time and time again from a lot of our really large customers, that they do business with us because of how we treat our employees and how we're redefining business. And that to me really meant a lot.
Love that. I love that. We are going to make our next transition to SaLisa. Kameale, what you and Yvette and your entire team are doing is absolutely phenomenal. I find the business model fascinating. I find the timing to be fascinating, the levels and layers of expertise to be fascinating. Again, folks who are here in the comments, just continuing to toot your own horn, to toot the horn of ChargerHelp. It's exciting to see. I know it's a ton of work, a lot of work, but we're excited about how this solution can really set the stage for ongoing models across the country and even across the world, with all of us participating in this new kind of green solution as the world continues to change and move towards electric vehicles.
Thank you so much. And shout out to my field service manager, Clyde Ellis, who's doing an amazing job with all 32 of our employees. But thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. SaLisa, we're going to bring you up to the stage. David, would love for you to introduce SaLisa and SaLisa for you to also say more about your work.
SaLisa, welcome. SaLisa Berrien, founder and CEO of COI Energy. Come up from 25 years in electric power and smart grid, worked for a bunch of utilities, including PF&L and PECO and Con Ed. And building COI Energy to automate and streamline both energy efficiency and energy management. So welcome.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Sherrell, for the opportunity to be on here and share some of the amazing stuff that my team is doing.
Do you want to just give us a little orientation to how COI works and how you got started in?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been in the industry for a long time. As Taj mentioned, he likes to tell some stories. I'll tell you a little story of background on myself, which really kind of drives how I really got to the energy space. Growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, my family experienced the energy burden. They weren't able to pay the electric bill every month, so we lived in the dark quite often. And so as a kid growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, you don't think that, but, it really had an impact on my life. And I remember when I went on to college and I was getting ready to get out of college, I wanted to go back and work for the utility. And all my colleagues were like, SaLisa, you're crazy. That's a white male dominated field. It's not progressive. You're a mechanical engineer. And I wanted to go back because I recognized that those people were heroes to me whenever they turned our power back on. And so for me, I wanted to figure out a way of how could I help? So I got into the utility industry working in marketing and sales as a sales engineer and helping large industrial and commercial businesses improve the efficiency of those buildings. Fast forward to me working for 4 different startups on helping to balance the electric grid by helping businesses and buildings improve their efficiency. And so 5 years ago, I saw this opportunity where customers weren't being heard. And I said, okay, what could I do? I've always been frontline to businesses, and I understand the whole thing of efficiency. So we went on and developed this venture to really be on this mission about eliminating energy waste in buildings. So you probably know buildings waste 30% of the energy they consume. That's over $55 billion a year that's being wasted, and over 300 million metric tons of carbon being emitted into our environment. I don't think people do that because they want to. I think people do it because they don't know that they're doing it. And so what we've deployed is this digital energy management platform that basically operates as a virtual energy assistant for businesses, and giving them that clear line of sight on how they're using energy, and then giving them those insights in order to have them prevent waste. So not make waste and we correct it, prevent waste from happening from our machine learning technology.
What was the journey like to go from both in the utilities and then in the startups, but then to be a founder yourself? I mean, what did you have to learn, and what did you take away?
Well, I got to tell you, so working at the utility really prepared me for understanding the ins and outs of how do you have a startup to work with utilities. But then me working at 4 different startups, the first startup I worked at, we had an amazing exit. I was there pre-IPO and then for the IPO. But what I got to see at all of the startups I worked at is really the ins and outs of how do you run a business. And so that taught me, number one, you're not going to wear one hat. You're going to wear a whole bunch of hats. And so you have to be flexible. And then it taught me how to be persistent and not give up. So if I would have like looked at this from, oh, I want to start a business and it's all going to be great, that's not the journey. So founders need to understand, if they want to get into this kind of business, it's not for the faint of heart. Like, you have to have the tenacity and the perseverance in order to overcome a lot of challenges you're going to be faced with. So like, listen to Kameale and to Taj, you hear a whole lot of, the upside where we got to, but there's a piece of our story that is not like the beautification that we want it to be. And so working at those startups helped me to see the ins and outs of it all.
That's incredible. SaLisa, what's been very impressive as well is that, your company has board members from blue chip companies, from Hewlett Packard to Morgan Stanley. Can you talk about the role large industries play in solving some of these climate challenges that we're facing?
Absolutely. So let me tell you this first. COI stands for Circle of Influence. So I knew when I started this company that I was going to need to have people around me that can actually help propel me in the company forward. And so I was on a mission to make sure the partners that I had were partners that can do just that. So partnering with Morgan Stanley and being a part of Carla Harris's Multicultural Innovation Lab, that literally set the foundation for us. And then it's just been upwards from there, like SAP, working with them, being a part of their foundry, Vanessa Liu and Sally Gian, they have been amazing people. And then it just really opened up opportunities for customers. Like, so SAP, as you may know, they have like 80% of the largest utilities run on SAP. Well, we were looking to serve utilities, so it just made sense. It was a no-brainer. And then they have all of these Fortune 500 companies that are running on, it's like 72%. So for us, it made sense to partner with an organization that can open doors for opportunities to scale with customers.
Let's go back to scaling, because that's been sort of one of the themes here. And again, this is, as you say, this has got to happen across buildings, everywhere, all kinds of buildings. What does it take, and what do you need? I mean, what would it, you've been terrific in getting a lot of I think Kameale talked about grants. Some people call it non-dilutive funding, but also pitch competitions and crowdfunding and other things. What would it take to what do you need to really take it to the level you want?
Yeah, so we actually, just last week I was in Ithaca, New York, and we just won the Diversity and Climate Tech Award. So super excited about that. But really, the investments that we're looking for, we're prepping for our Series A, and we're thinking we're going to be in I won't go into the numbers, but we're prepping for our Series A. And with that, like, we're really trying to expand our team from sales to customer success, and also our technical team. And, right now we've just won several contracts, a major contract with Con Ed, that's a multi-million-dollar contract. And then also a contract with a healthcare consortium, just huge contracts. Like, if we just delivered on those alone, we would exceed all of our goals in the next few years. And so having a team in place that can help us deliver on all these contracts is top of mind for me. So yes, raising the capital to get the teams in place to deliver with excellence, because what we're super proud about, one thing that's always been important to me was customer delight. So give customers what they ask for, not what we think they should have. And so with every customer that's come on our platform, we have over 300 customers currently to date. We have zero churn. We've lost zero customers in the last 5 years. And we want to kind of keep it that way. And so a part of our mission is, do what we say we're going to do, and then deliver for our customers. And to do that at the scale that we're looking at, we're going to really need to expand our team.
Absolutely. SaLisa, we are so grateful for you and for your work. We are excited to continue to dive later as we sort of wrap up our interview with Donnel, who will be coming to the stage, wanting to chat more about your recent award, and just also where you continue to see this space going. But congratulations on just all of the work and all of the achievements.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So, David, I don't know if you want to introduce Donnel. I think we know Donnel almost inside and out and have followed his work for years. So I'm excited to have our final discussion with you, Donnel. But David, I'll let you speak a little bit more on Donnel and BlocPower.
Well, hi, Donnel. Welcome. We've been chatting for a while as well, and I want to, Dennis, maybe you can pop up. We had Donnel actually on the podcast a few weeks back as well. So pop that link up, Donnel.
Pop that link. Y'all got me in trouble on that podcast, man. I gotta explain. Y'all goaded me when I was sleep deprived into saying some stupid stuff, and I got in a lot of trouble, David Bing.
You know, I think you just made the case. I think everyone's going to go listen to that podcast now. So,
okay, I need to learn about public relations from Sherrell.
Sorry for any trouble, Donnel, but you're pretty good at actually getting yourself into trouble. Also, good kind of trouble, as John Lewis said. So, BlocPower, you know, again, is one of these companies we just think is one of the sort of examples of this scaling up and of the opportunity that folks you know, sometimes haven't been seeing, but that, you know, really takes to bring you know, energy efficiency and clean energy, you know, again, to every building in every community. So hats off to what you've done with BlocPower. Why don't we just maybe if folks don't know it, just maybe briefly say what you're doing. And then what I want to get into is, you know, again, we've talked, you know, Taj talked about truth, like what does it take to really build a company like that?
I think it's great to be here with all of you and to follow such robust guests. I'm definitely the poorest dressed person. I know Miss Dorsey is not going to give me her well-dressed gentleman endorsement for my Duke sweatshirt in the airport here. But where we are now at BlocPower is trying to help communities across America prepare for federal infrastructure investment. So if there's going to be, you know, $2 to $4 trillion is going to be invested, we know that 40% of that needs to be invested in low-income communities. How do we make sure that happens? Which infrastructure investment should go where? Down to the block, down to the building, so that we provide the federal government and all stakeholders with the transparent data that they're going to need to ensure that we get clean energy and the benefits of it to our communities across America. So we're working, we have a data set with 125 million buildings across America. We're analyzing and labeling and targeting those buildings and exposing them into our data platform with a bunch of machine learning and statistical modeling and energy efficiency modeling in order to figure out which buildings across the country are in low-income communities, which buildings are most likely to benefit from clean energy or healthy buildings upgrades, and where are we going to see that impact. Which ones are financeable using Wall Street capital and which ones are going to need philanthropic capital. And so we're building that platform out. And then, and we have the other thing is following Kameale. I'm also going to note that I built BlocPower for like 8 years. There is no The Plug case study about BlocPower. Meanwhile, Kameale has been around for like 18 months and she's got it all. And I know she's a superstar.
But wait, it's coming, Donnel, because we've been covering you, so it's coming.
But a case study. So I mean, Kameale's amazing, and I think we've all been learning from her about how to think about workforce development in the clean energy space. And so we have a project in New York City where we're hiring, well, we're calling 1,000 George Floyds. These are folks who live in financially underserved, high crime communities. They're at risk of gun violence, according to the New York City government. And we're hiring and training them to do clean energy installation of solar panels, hopefully of electric vehicle charging if we can partner with ChargerHelp. They're installing community-owned internet systems at neighborhood scale to cover, we think, 2 million people across New York. And so, you know, we're really trying to test the question of like, well, if you can hire 1,000 undereducated, under-resourced, under opportunity, you know, they haven't had enough opportunity. We believe the talent is there, and we believe that you can build a workforce of the future from these communities and then help to deliver green infrastructure across America at scale in partnership with workers from these communities. And so we're trying to test that thesis out first in New York, but in a couple other cities as well. So that's what we're up to.
That's incredible. I loved the details on the modeling that you all are building around your data sets with all of these buildings. But I would love to know, Donnel, where might there be a cost barrier to get buy-in from some of these municipalities and building owners to really implement clean tech in their communities? As you mentioned, you've been at this for quite a while, and I can imagine that starting out, the knowledge gap around the importance and the significance. Could you try again? Apologies. Siri wants to join the conversation. But I can imagine that the knowledge gap was a challenge, and now maybe there's maybe less of a knowledge gap. But what are some of those barriers to get the buy-in?
Yeah, I think that Taj nailed it when he talked about growing up next to this toxic, dump that impacted the kidneys of several generations of his family. So it's not the people in our community. We're becoming more and more aware of what's needed and what's unfair and what's necessary in terms of environmental justice, right? So that's becoming clearer and clearer. And I think certainly in the African-American community, which was such a huge supporter of Barack Obama, in terms of the climate initiatives that we were trying to get through at that time, there was a lot of education that was done by the Obama administration of low-income folks, people of color. And of course, the climate crisis continues unabated. And so, we had all these extreme weather events this year that's billions and billions of dollars worth of damage. And so more and more Americans are alarmed about climate change. And that's people from all areas of society. So that's the customer education part. It is figuring out how to message, how to communicate with folks in a way that they can understand. It's also figuring out how to price the historic neglect, right? Because it's not only the toxic waste dumps, it's also the lead, the asbestos, the mold that is in buildings that have, been historically redlined, right? And haven't been able to access capital for upgrades, for sustainability, or for any other thing, right? And so there are these extra health costs, right? Like, SaLisa might want to put an energy system in a building with Con Edison, but if the building has lead and asbestos, all that stuff has to be removed before you can even get to clean energy, right? And so those are literally extra costs that have to be incurred and financed, and so part of what we're trying to build with our mapping tool is, okay, how can you map out those additional incremental costs across the country so at least we know what we're working with? And our argument is that the healthcare sector actually needs to start paying in to clean energy in low-income communities, because as we remove the toxic waste that Taj was talking about, you're going to reduce the strain on public health resources. And so we need to start to leverage those public health investments up front.
Donnel, it's interesting, the liabilities or the disadvantages at some level are also the opportunities is what you're saying to improve both on the health front, on the climate front. And it seems to me like you've told me that, Wall Street, you mentioned Wall Street money, got it in the form of Goldman Sachs, Silicon Valley at some level got it in the form of Andreessen Horowitz. The impact crowd, which we're covering, was sort of more slow on the uptake. And,
you're not going to get me in trouble again, David Bank. I'm not going to.
That's what, you can be as diplomatic as you like.
Okay.
I just want to see what does it take to really get the investor crowd to see the opportunity as you see it?
In impact investors? Or
all investors, but you can take.
I'm not going to comment on impact investors, but for regular investors, I think that part of, at least from a Silicon Valley standpoint, it's understanding that this is actually a new market. So from a Wall Street and Silicon Valley perspective, clean energy infrastructure at scale in any community is a new market because it doesn't exist yet, right? We have fossil fuel infrastructure, not clean energy infrastructure. So that's all new. And then to try to introduce it to the hardest to reach and hardest to finance communities where venture capitalists and Wall Street have the least experience and expertise and data is hard. So you're trying to build a new model on top of a new customer segment. And so there is kind of a leap of faith that's required at the beginning. But, we've been around for 7 years and have started to generate data and case studies that allow us to make the case to investors that just because they don't see an economic opportunity. We certainly do, because I grew up in these communities, and I know the amount of toxic waste and fossil fuel waste that's there, and all that stuff has a cost. So then it becomes a question of allocating the public benefits and public good that is generated by introducing clean energy to these communities. So whether that's public health, public good, whether that's greenhouse gas reduction, public good, whether it's lower utility public goods, you got to find that economic impact where it intersects with social and environmental impact and try to monetize that. And as you monetize that and generate data, we see that the financial class responds to that data.
Yeah. I just want to switch gears a little bit. And you talked about the 40% goal of reaching communities of color, disadvantaged communities. I think that was Biden's, one of his early executive orders. I want to ask you how you see that playing out, and also more broadly, where is the kind of popular mobilization around that opportunity, so that the political debate can be a little different than all the just maneuvering and shenanigans, and get down to like, hey, let's get on with this rebuild?
That's a great question. I mean, I think President Biden did sign this executive order, I think in the first month of his presidency, saying that he was going to invest 40% of all infrastructure dollars in low and moderate income communities and communities of color. That requires the federal government to introduce a new set of regulations across multiple agencies. And so, they don't even have the tracking systems to know whether they're failing the goal or reaching the goal, right? Like the Department of Energy, if they're going to put out $10 billion, okay, well, how do you track if $4 billion of that actually went to low and moderate income communities? Like, what counts? And so we've had a lot of experience in New York with this, because the Biden plan nationally is based on our New York state plan, where we have a 40% goal for clean energy in low income communities as well. And so, look, it's not easy to get a whole government to shift the way that it makes investments and tracks investments and hold itself accountable to that. So, but we applaud the Biden team for taking that on as a challenge, and the state of New York for taking that on as a challenge. I think with regard to popular mobilization, look, we had the EPA administrator come out to the Bronx, and he came out to a church at a Catholic school that we greened and reduced a bunch of energy efficiency, and moved it away from oil and fossil fuels and polluting the kids in the school and the neighborhood, to a more clean energy system. And it also hosted our kind of neighborhood-owned Wi-Fi system. And I think what he shared with us, which I think was useful, is that like we really need models of public-private partnerships that are repeatable. It's almost like, in software, Sherrell, we talk about like MVPs or whatever, right? It's almost like we need green infrastructure MVPs that can help all stakeholders, whether it's low-income folks, the government, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, understand the data and the numbers and the metrics and the reality behind what it takes to introduce green infrastructure. And so the more of those we have, and the more help we have from folks like you all in the media, who can help us to distribute stories across the country of, hey, this is what the benefits of green infrastructure is going to do to your community. It means that your grandma's kidneys will work, right? It means that your kidneys will work. Like, that's what we're actually talking about here. It's not about the 3.5 trillion or the 2 trillion or mansion or cinema. It's about people's like kidneys. It's about kids with asthma, and like, it's real, and we can achieve these things. It's not like pie in the sky, put a man on the moon aspirational. It's like, no, we can go into our communities and actually impact things for the better. And how do we ground it in the lived experiences of communities of color, so that they...
Oh, let's see. It looks like I may have lost some sound, Donnel. Oh, there you are.
So you got to ground it in the lived experiences of communities of color, so that folks understand that this green infrastructure and clean energy is for them and for their families. And the more we can do of that, I think the better off we'll all be.
That's great. Thank you so much, Donnel. I actually want to go ahead and shift over to inviting everyone to the stage just for kind of a final thought here, and also ensure that people know exactly where to reach all of you in your respective maybe social medias, and also for connecting with your different companies and organizations as well. But one of the questions I had here, and David, also feel free to jump in, but a few of your companies are offering crowdfunding models that really allow those everyday people. And I think, Taj, you had referenced this early on, but wanted to understand what's the next frontier of mainstream investment into sustainability. And again, I love Donnel. Looks like you may have popped off here, but Donnel had mentioned something like the potential for infrastructure MVPs, green infrastructure MVPs. But maybe you all can speak to those different investing opportunities, especially where the everyday person can make an investment into the organizations that you all are leading.
Yeah, I'll start because, again, number one, these two young ladies who are here, I was one of the judges for SaLisa, so I'm very proud that she won the Chloe Capital this past weekend. But, there's some really great opportunities that's happening. Shout out to my friend Sherrell Campos from Republic, and Republic has been really making the forefront of really kind of focusing on investing in sustainable companies that are on their platform, especially companies of color. One of the other things we've seen recently is myself and a gentleman by the name of Arf Hernandez. Shout out to Arf, who's at NextEra Energy. He rounded up a number of investors of color to come in on a special purpose vehicle to invest independently in it. And last, I got to shout out to my girl Kiana Patterson of Los Angeles, who has something with a couple other folks, Ricky Starner and a couple others, called Cap Table Coalition, where each week we look at opportunities. Some are in the sustainable space, in the clean tech, climate tech space, for us as individual investors of color to invest in. So I'm seeing a lot of diversity in capital, and I'm hoping that we continue to do it. So it's not just the traditional institutionals, and I'm an institutional, myself, but I'm really loving the diversity on the investor side that's coming to support founders like SaLisa, Kameale, and Donnel.
And I think to add to that, when we first went out, to raise, I actually had one of my early technicians. He was like, yeah, I saved $5,000. Like, I really want to invest in the company. And at that time, some of the advisors that we had, a lot of people told us not to do crowdfunding because at that time, the appetite for other institutional investors was that folks looked down upon it. And so, as a new founder, Taj was talking about us earlier, we turned away $8 million worth of investments. And we had the privilege, to be very selective on who we allowed to be on our cap table. But one of the things that we're trying to do moving forward in our Series A is to also now find investors that are okay with us opening it up, to some folks from our community. Because what we did do is that before we went out to our C series, I was like, well, at least one Black person got to make money off of ChargerHelp. So we went and found us an angel investor. Shout out to Dr. Bonita Stewart, because I was like, I'm gonna let her in because we got one person. But yeah, I think that it's like this, we're in a very interesting phase that as I become just more aware of the landscape and what we can and can't do, is just trying to figure out, how do I get people from my community to invest and to understand what that investment means, and then still be able to bring on, other institutional investments that are very important, to the success of ChargerHelp. So it's a wild world out there, but thankful to people like Taj and even Donnel, to set examples for us and explain a lot of things to us. We're at least I know I'm just very grateful for them.
Yeah, and just really to add on to what Kameale is saying, so we did crowdfunding as well. And what I found, for me, having over 1,000 individuals being able to invest that came, many of them coming from my community that didn't even understand what investing was. So I think we're helping shift the mindset too. It's like, oh, I can have a piece of this company. And I got to tell you, until this day, we did our crowdfunding earlier this year. I have folks from our brown and Black community saying, hey, I want to invest in your company. Could I do it? And I'm like, oh, it's no longer open now. But it's now gotten folks to even understand this other way of generating wealth. So for me, I'm super excited about Sherrell and Taj and all these other folks that are out there really just making sure that we can democratize investing into Black ventures.
Thank you. Thank you. We are approaching the hour here. We are so very grateful for all of your comments, all of your insights, most of all, your work. David, any kind of final thoughts here with our panelists before you and I close us out?
I just wanted to, I think Donnel said, climate tech MVPs, you all, I think he meant it in a different way, but you all are MVPs. And, and I think Taj, you mentioned at the top, alpha, and we talked about impact alpha. That's both in returns, but it's also in impact, and you're all outperforming in impact as well. So really appreciate all you joining today.
Thank you. Thank you all. And again, please, everyone in the comments, I want to say, where everyone can find you. Of course, your organizations are listed here in your lower third banner. But it also seems like you all are already very well known. Just based on the comments here, there are so many people rooting for you here in the comments. Again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to move everyone from the stream as David and I start to close this out. Again, everyone, please make sure that you are following the work of these incredible entrepreneurs and leaders in this space. David, this has been our first ever LinkedIn Live in collaboration with another news organization, and this has been such a great time. I am excited about the coverage that we have, specifically in this particular space and in this particular topic that both of our publications are very passionate about, and beyond as well. Again, we were flashing banners at the bottom to join tpinsights.com as well as impactalpha.com to subscribe to our briefings. But also we have a premium subscription service that gives and provides opportunity to get access to some of our exclusive reporting, some of our data sets, ongoing calls like this as well. So David, maybe you can speak a bit to some of the offers you have on the table for Impact Alpha, and we can do the same here for the plug.
Well, yeah, thanks. I was just going to say, we're following all of these companies. We have been for a while, and many more. And folks in the chat and in the audience, we're open ears to hear what you guys are all up to. And then the other place to follow it, of course, is in the plug. So I think the code for both, we have the same code, right, Sherrell? It's welcome 100. And you can get $100 off the Impact Alpha subscription and $100 off the plug subscription. I believe we've now actually reconciled, and our subscription prices are the same. So we're really on this kind of parallel paths here, and maybe we'll even put a bundle together soon enough. But that's the next step. But in any event, go to impactalpha.com/subscribe. Go to TP Insights. Is there a particular...
Yep, tpinsights.com. You can, and again, impactalpha.com, using code welcome100 to save $100 off of each subscription. Run fast, get access to even deeper conversations, reporting, and data sets like this. David, I hope that we can do this again together in the future.
Let's do it, Sherrell. It's terrific. Thank you so much for pulling us together.
Thank you. And thank you again for every panelist that joined us today. You're doing phenomenal work. I think we could have had ongoing conversations over the next hour. We are grateful to our audience and all those who are watching, those who hopped in either late or had to take off a little early. This conversation will stay on the LinkedIn Live page as well as our Facebook page. So you will have access to see the conversation and view the conversation in its entirety. So again, feel free to return to the page. There was so many gems dropped and so many great insights that our panelists shared today. We greatly appreciate you all joining us this afternoon, and please come back and continue to engage with our discussions. Again, this is our first collaboration with Impact Alpha formally, and we definitely hope that it will not be the last, for sure.
Thank you so much, Sherrell.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Tuesday.
Thanks, everybody.